Hey everybody, it's Kelly. Welcome back to another episode of Ask a Therapist. We talk about a lot of things on this channel. The one thing that we don't talk about though is the thing that ends up in my emails the most often. So this, our last week of Pride Month, we're going out with a bang. Pun intended. We don't talk about sex on this channel much. We're gonna stop that now. Queer sex can have shame attached to it because of heteronormativity and homophobia. The idea of having sex with your partner, especially if it's your first same-sex partner or your first partner outside of a cis-het relationship, it brings up all sorts of things for people, and not always right away and not always longer down the line, but it is rare for it to never be problematic at all internally for a person. The shame around sex, specifically when it comes to the queer community, is so intense. And a lot of that is because the typical societal understanding of what constitutes sex doesn't fit the queer community. Because if sex is penis in vagina, that does not fit so many people within the LGBTQIA+ umbrella. That's problematic because I would then ask you, what constitutes sex between two men? What constitutes sex between two women? I can guarantee that whatever your definition is, there's probably
well, what about this instance?
That would be extremely valid as counting as sex. There's a couple of things here that I want to really identify and be super specific about. We need to be clear that what constitutes sex for one person may be different than what constitutes sex for another. For instance, two women, if they're having sex, does there have to be penetration in order for it to be sex? Does an orgasm have to happen? A huge thing in purity culture growing up was that anal didn't count, or hand stuff, which is what we called it because we were too embarrassed to talk about it. Hand stuff didn't count because it wasn't a penis and a vagina, so you could still hold on to your virginity or you still hadn't had sex with each other. So how do we translate that into queer sex? How does that get translated? Do queer people just not have sex? Obviously not. But we can't make penetration of penis into vagina the definition of sex. You can't even make penetration the definition of sex, right? That's not an option to be the only definition of sex if you want to be inclusive. I do believe that everyone's definition of sex is different. I do not believe that anyone's definition of consent is different. No means no. No always means no. At any point in time, you get to say no. We got that, right? Beyond the consent piece, though, the understanding of what is sex and what is not sex is murky. And because we don't know, and because no one talks about it, and there's no definition of it, queer people are kind of at a loss sometimes to have that guidebook, to have that understanding that makes it super clear about what they're doing and who they're doing it with and why. I would suggest that everyone who is engaging in sex has an understanding of how they define sex. I'm real big on talking about things, and I understand that not every sexual encounter is going to have a whole lot of talking time built in beyond mutual consent. But having that understanding and that idea of where your kind of lines are, what each of those things mean, is pretty important on this journey of understanding your pleasure and what it is that you want. So Netflix has this documentary series called Explained, and they have one video that's called Sex Explained. I thought this would be a great jumping off point because they are pretty inclusive and pretty general in the things that they say. They do say there's no discernible difference across straight or queer people in how often they want sex. There's no actual discernible difference in genders, even though purity culture will tell you there is. None of this is scientifically provable. All of that is assumption that has been handed down for generations, and we're all done with that now. Specifically, this video is intended to demystify sex. And that's what we want to do, right? Generally, fantasies fall under three headings: group sex, novelty sex, and power and control. They all feel sort of taboo for different reasons, so we're going to kind of get into what those are actually focusing on, right? The fantasy of group sex itself is rooted in people's want to feel desired and validated. The idea of more than one person at once wanting you and wanting to explore your body can be pretty intoxicating, but people's need to feel desired and their need to feel validated in their needs, in their physical needs, is sort of where this group sex fantasy comes from. No shock to anybody. Generally, the majority of people, their fantasy is some sort of a threesome, but honestly, it's the opinion of some experts that it's that way because that's what you see in porn and on TV and you read about. Or maybe we see it in porn on TV and read about it because that was already people's fantasy. Who knows? The point being, the fantasy of group sex, not shameful. It means that you have the need to be desired and supported and validated as a human with physical needs. Number 2 is novelty. That can mean toys, that can mean public places, that can mean unconventional anything that takes you out of your normal patterns when it comes to sex and pleasure. Those would fall under the novelty category. In fact, the novelty fantasies are about breaking out of your routine. Either sex with your partner feels a little routine. Your life might feel a little routine, and so you want to mix it up a little bit. As much as we like routines, there are times that our brains and our bodies need to get out of the norm and into something that's a little more dangerous and a little more exciting. That's why people switch jobs. That's why people rearrange their furniture. That's sometimes why people change partners. As humans, we don't want everything the same all the time. So a novelty fantasy of having sex in a public place or using toys or anything that is outside of how you normally experience pleasure is just you acting out your need for change in routine. Then we've got the last one, which is power and control. And honestly, this is the one that gets the bad rap if you don't understand it. Generally, this fantasy of power and control is a way for people to cope with anxieties. There are all these things that are out of your control that you feel like you're supposed to control. Then if you can give up control to a trusted partner or partners in something that gives you pleasure, it really does help to calm some of those anxieties or to make you feel less anxious about the things that are outside of your control that you didn't give up your control to. When we willingly give up our control or willingly take control of someone else's pleasure, there's power in that. There's weight in that. And that's nothing to be ashamed of. If we're talking BDSM, if we're talking any kind of power play, if we're talking anything in this genre, it really is people trying to cope with their anxieties. Who doesn't have anxiety right now? This is the super interesting thing to me about all of this. The quote in the video is that of the people who have fantasies, 79% of people want to act on their fantasies, but only 23 actually do. Why is that? That again comes from the idea that it's not okay to ask for what you want. If you have a certain need, a certain want, a certain desire, those are all different things, by the way. If you have one of those, you should be able to express it to your partner. Your partner gets to decide whether or not they engage in it, obviously, because consent is key here. But the security and the safety of expressing what you want and need should be inherent because you as a person are allowed to have the needs that you have without us adding on the assumption of morality. We can't assign a moral label to someone's fantasy life. And we really shouldn't assign a moral label to what 1 or 2 or more consenting adults do with their own bodies. However, the thing that stops so many people from asking for what they want is the fact that they don't know. They don't know what they want. There are so many people in specifically the US, I know in other countries as well, who were raised with the idea to not have wants, to not have needs. Also, definitely do not have sexual needs, especially before you start having sexual partners. That can be so problematic. If you don't know what your body responds to, how are you going to help your partner or partners to be able to know how to best engage your pleasure? Purity culture and religious entities have convinced us that pleasure is shame, that sex is shame. And a lot of that's connected to self-pleasure. That's right, to masturbation. I've recently become an affiliate partner with Lalo, which is a company that makes luxury sex toys. Lalo's entire message is about pleasure. It's about discovering your pleasure and not being ashamed of it and knowing who you are and what feels good for you. They have entire lines that are set up for really any number of people to use. Their products are amazing. They're well made. They are pretty on point. I would encourage you to go ahead and check out their Instagram, find out more about the company. The reason that I connected with the company in the first place is because their message of inclusivity and their message of it does not matter who you are, you deserve pleasure if you want it. Their sort of zero shame policy is so hugely needed today. So you can follow their Instagram. You can also use the code that's in this video for 50% off through the rest of Pride Month. So check out that link. It'll take you to their website and you can check out what they have. Even more so, I would encourage you to go to their social media pages. Go and look at the things that they're putting out there to lessen shame, to help people to understand that they deserve the pleasure that they want. I know some of you are going to have questions. I know some of you are going to have specific things that you want me to do videos about. I will do more of these sex videos if you want them. I just need you to let me know what specifically you want to hear about, because I have a lot to say on the subject. Feel free to comment. If you don't feel safe commenting, go ahead and email me. I'd love to hear what it is that you need in this area from this channel. And that's it for today. Thank you so much for being here. I will see you all next time. And until then, take care of yourselves and each other. Bye.